Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you some basic principles to lighting a scene in Maya. We'll cover a 3-point lighting scheme, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a ground plane, polyplane. This will serve as our ground for this scene. And just scale it pretty big. That should be more than enough. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I have some type of subject that I'm lighting. In this case I'm going to choose a sphere, and I'm going to go ahead and just bring it just above my ground plane. Okay? Now I'm going to just drag it off to the side a bit. Okay, and then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a camera. Now, we haven't done this yet, so it's really not too difficult. We'll go to Create, and Cameras, and then Camera. Now, from here, I'm going to switch my top viewport to my camera. So, I'm going to go to Panels, Perspective, and Camera 1. So now instead of my camera 1 being, or my top view being the top view, I switched it to be the camera 1 that we're going to be using as our viewport. Okay. And now in camera 1, I just basically set it up so I can actually see where the ball is and where I am in virtual space. And now I can move it around in this viewport. However, that isn't much help yet, because we're going to cover a little bit of rendering. And the first thing I want to do is when I'm in my camera 1, I want to make sure that my resolution gate is on. So I'm going to go to View and Camera Settings and Resolution Gate. Now by default this will be at 960 by 540. And what I want to do here is I want to just kind of put this in a spot where I'm comfortable, and I'm kind of trying to keep in mind some good staging practices such as rule of thirds, and I'm going to use this bottom line here as my horizon line for give or take my rule of thirds here. Now the other thing I want to do, I'm just kind of messing around here to see if I can get, that'll work. The other thing I want to do is go into my render settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my modeling tab to rendering. Under render, I'm going to go to render settings. In my render settings, I have Arnold renderer set here. I don't know, it should come default with everyone. I'll show you Maya software first, and then we'll switch into the Arnold renderer. Now, my image format, we don't really need to worry about this too much, because as we save out single frames, when we render a current frame, we can save it out as a JPEG, and this is more so when we're running a batch render. So, that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and scrub down, and my renderable camera, it says perspective. I'm going to switch to camera 1. That's actually also if you're running a batch render where you're rendering a number of frames, start frame 1 to 10. So if you were to run render an animation of 10 frames or whatever, that's where this would come into play. Now, my presets here, I want to change to 1280 by 720. The default setting here is HD 720. If you just type in 1280 by 720 here, with pixel aspect ratio on, it switches to this default setting anyway. So HD 720 is also this. Okay. So that's really all we need to worry about right now at the moment. And what that does is it changes this viewport here from 960 by 540 to 1280 by 720. And 1280 by 720 is a stronger 16 by 9 aspect ratio, which is a widescreen format, which is what we typically use for everything now with flat screen TVs, monitors, everything. Even your iPhones and tablets, when you flip them sideways, that's a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So it's a very common aspect ratio, and we're going to stick using this aspect ratio, 16 by 9 aspect ratio, and the width in pixels and height is 1280 by 720. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hit close now, and we're going to be in the Maya software. So now that I have that down, the other thing I want to do is I'm going to select my camera. So if I go into this view here, I'm going to select my camera, and I don't want to be able to move this camera. Once you have a set position on your camera, it's really easy to lose it. You can't like if I were in my viewport here and I start moving around, I cannot undo those movements and get my camera back into that same exact position, because it sort of acts as if a viewport, such as the perspective view. Whereas if you're modeling something, you can undo, welds or merging vertices or extruding faces, but you cannot undo changing your viewport viewing position. So with that being said, the first thing I'm going to do with that is select my camera here, and I'm going to go ahead and lock these attributes or settings. So I'm just going to click and drag down and highlight all these. You could do one at a time, whatever works best for you. And then we're just going to do lock selected. And now I will not be able to move my camera at all, which is really, really great, because I don't want to be able to. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to get some extra pieces in here, because I would like to have a little bit stronger staging if I'm going to include some lighting. Now I'll do this by creating I'll do a cone, polygon cone. That'll work. And if I change this to 4, it becomes a pyramid. And just to get a little bit more enticing sort of staging, I'm going to include some extra objects. And then I'm going to act as if the sphere is my main subject. And trying to maintain those rule of thirds. Oh. I'm just duplicated that object. And now run something like that. And that's going to be fine. I'm not too concerned with this scene in terms of staging. So I have a foreground, midground, background, I guess you could say, and then I have this sort of just these objects to increase my staging appeal. So that being said, now I have a couple extra objects in my scene to begin lighting, and the way I'm going to create a light is I'm going to go to and I'm going to maintain a 3-point lighting scheme. And in the canvas shell, I want you to go ahead and take a look at the Word document that I attached before continuing, and sort of take a first glance at the first image in there, and that is a 3-point lighting scheme. Alright. And I'm going to actually pull one up really quickly. This probably isn't going to be the same one in the Word document, but that's okay. Okay, so here we have a basic 3-point lighting scheme. We have a backlight, a fill light, and a key light. Now, it gives you a few extra little tips in here. Your key light is usually a less intense light from your key light, so your fill light also can be a different color depending. So our fill light here is 50 to 75% power of the light of the key light, which is this one. 45-degree angle to camera on this light. And then our backlight is a low intensity. Now these are for real lighting in real life with real life cameras. 3D doesn't follow the same exact rules as real life lighting. So, and we are also allowed to do all types of things that is not possible in real life lighting, which makes it even more difficult at times, but also really useful at other times, where we can, in more technical sense, we could have light pass through certain objects if we didn't want it to cast a shadow, and so on and so forth, where you don't get that luxury or as easily in a real life shoot. Here's another example: key light, fill light, and then backlight and the object. These are just really common lighting schemes. So, okay, I'll go ahead and just get this out of the way. That's fine. Now from here, I've got the scene lit up, or set up with my staging setup, and the next thing I need to do is include lights, and we're going to follow that same basic 3-point lighting scheme. So I'm going to go to Create, Light, and I'm going to use Directional Light. Now here, I'm going to start with my key light. Now this is typically rotated at 90 degrees, give or take, or on my y-axis, and then about there, and then I'm going to give it that slight angle, and then I'm going to actually press, I'm just going to go through the motions. So 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded display, 6 is shaded display with texture maps, and 7 is shaded display with lights. Okay, so now you can start to see, if I go from 6 to 7, the difference in lighting. It's beginning to cast shadows. Now it will not cast shadows on the ground, so that's something we'll have to save for rendering later. But for now, this gives us a sort of good heads up. In this case, I'm going to start with using my lighting here, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name this key light, and then I'm going to duplicate it, drag it over here, and I'm going to show you another common practice here. And you'll see that that shadow sort of started to cast away. And the other thing I'm going to do, now that I have it pointed approximately at the same point that I want it to be, I'm going to go to my attribute editor, and I'm going to change the intensity to 0.5. I'm also going to go ahead and change the color. Now this is something that you'll see it's starting to cast that blue light. Now this is a really common practice in night scenes in animation or film, gaming, so on and so forth, where instead of having it be all black, because it's hard to see in darkness, they usually use like a dark blue, and you probably start to see it in films where you have night scenes. They'll use this blue to cast a shadow on certain objects, because cameras actually need light in order to show what they're capturing. So this is a really great way to give the illusion of night using a darker blue. and then make sure your intensity is about 50%. Now the other thing I want to do is I need to include, because I'm focusing on this as my main subject, this is my fill light, I need to create one more light, which will be my backlight. Now these we typically want to use to cast a rim light, if you will. And here I'm going to go to my attribute editor. I'm going to change this to light, and I'm going to go to actually make this brighter. I'm going to make it 2 times the strength to see what happens. And I need to make sure that that fill light is, or backlight, is on there. And I'm going to go ahead and go to render, and I'm going to do render current frame. And I'm in my perspective view, so that doesn't help too much. But what this actually is giving me is you're starting to see that rim light that you'll see in the Word document that is attached in the Canvas shell. Go ahead and open that up. There's a few samples of what the rim light does, and I believe it's a cat. It's a cat with a having a backlight display what it's called a rim lighting effect around what you see on the cat there. And we're going to sort of create that same illusion using the rim light here on the sphere, and we're starting to get that effect here. But I need it to happen from this viewport, so I'm going to go ahead and go render and render current frame again. And not so much, so I know I have some messing around to do. I know it is working. Maybe I bring it over here just ever so slightly, and I'm going to also increase to 3. Click in this viewport and render current frame. And it's ever so subtly starting to happen. I'm going to bring this down to 0.75. Like I said, these do not follow, we do not follow the same exact rules of real life lighting settings. And you're starting to see it a little bit here. And we don't have to get it around the entire object. In fact, I think this is pretty good. I'd like to have it a little bit more up top, where it starts to fade in here and then it comes around. And typically in 3D it says the key light's usually the strongest. However, in order to sort of get this effect, sometimes you need to make the backlight the strongest. And I made it 4 times the intensity of the default setting. And I'm going to do again a render and render current frame. I don't think we need to go into the Arnold rendering because I'm not sure if it'll work on everyone's computer, but I do know for a fact that the Maya software will. You could actually do, there's entire classes on just rendering and lighting, and as well as texturing. But this is the effect we're going for. We're looking to cast that blue shadow as if we're lighting a night scene. If this were any other scene, we could brighten it up and not use blue and make it a brighter scene. Also, you could sort of try to replicate lighting inside your scene already from a lamp or a window or so on and so forth. And that's where some really cool little tricks come into play. Let me see if I can just show you one really quickly. And I'll go ahead and do it right here. Alright, and we'll pretend that this is like a little window, and I'm going to go ahead and create lights and volume light. I believe it's volume light. No. That might be good for like a lamp or something. Area light. Now this is a great light for sort of like whatchamacallit, like ceiling, those LED ceiling lights would be a good example. Okay, so this brings the pointer where this pointer is facing is the direction in which that light will be showing. And what I'm doing here is I'm just going to show you a really quick little trick. We're pretending this is a window, of course, during daylight. Okay, and render current frame. Now this could change the entire lighting scenario of the scene, and it's starting to give that effect down here. I was hoping for an actual brighter light coming from this point, but it looks like you might have to simulate that with some type of texture in combination with the light itself. Okay, and this will bring up, and just to show you some other techniques that are commonly used, and this is just using the Maya software renderer. The thing about Maya software renderer is it cannot render smooth mode, which would be 3 on the keyboard, and it cannot render normal maps. It can render bump maps, but not normal maps. Now you could apply a texture to something like this. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and make it white and assign new material, as we already know how to do this. And I'm going to do a Lambert in this case, and I'm just going to make it a white, as if it's sunlight or something. And then you could apply like a window texture on it where there's an actual background coming through, where you have sort of this illusion of it being a window. Let's go ahead and do a render current frame. This could obviously affect the lighting on here, but that's besides the point. I just wanted to show you what I mean. So now you have this sort of little illusion that there's this, you could include an actual texture on here. I just changed the color to white, where it's an actual window coming through, or sunlight, and then have the sunlight here. And you could always change it if you wanted to be a little bit more traditional in terms of, I don't know, you can make it yellow. You could really change it to be any color you want, as if this was like the middle of the day or something where the sun's being set. And we'll do a render current frame again. and you'll see you can get all types of different little effects. Go ahead and play around with other lighting tools. All I'm really looking for is this 3-point lighting scheme. I just wanted to go ahead and show you a little bit extra for your projects that you're working on, to give you a little heads up. And one other thing, when we save these files, we can save these image files. Go File, Save Image, and 3D Modeling Online 1 Images. Okay, I'll go ahead and change this from here to a JPEG and just call it 3-point lighting, and hit save. And that's all I'm looking for this particular submission. I'm looking for your main subject. It doesn't have to be a pyramid or anything, but I would like you to include a couple extra elements in your staging to give it a little bit more of an appealing look. And the other thing is, I want to see this slight, subtle little rim light around. I want to see the blue. You could change the color to any color you like. Blue is just a standard night scene look. If it were red, it would signify sort of like evil or something, or power or something like that. Green is usually sort of like I want to say confusion or uncertainty, sort of awkwardness kind of color, and so on and so forth. That's all into color theory, but this is what I'm looking for. Just a main subject being having the key light, the 3-point lighting scheme set up with one key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And I want you to achieve this sort of very subtle rim light around that. And then that's all I've got for you. If you want to go ahead and try to do some other lighting setups, go ahead. But this is all I'm looking for this particular submission. So that covers a little bit about rendering. We changed the render settings. If you want to start dabbling with any other renderer, go right ahead. I used to show Mental Ray, but the licensing on that has changed so significantly in the last 2 or 3 years that I'm not even sure if you can get an educational license for the Mental Ray, where it used to come standard by default with Maya, and now it doesn't. It's a separate download because NVIDIA had purchased the actual renderer, Mental Ray. There's also other ones. There's V-Ray out there. Again, there's iRay. There's all these different types of renderers out there, none of which that I know for sure are free anymore. Lots of renderers have been purchased, and licensing is all changed. But if you find one that you like, the Arnold one, it's a pretty good renderer. I don't want to cover too much into it because it just gets a little too complicated with rendering. And we're going to go ahead and continue working on our modeling, lighting, texturing skills, and we're going to start getting into also animation here soon. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure to message me if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.